found that when I work on problems, I make them worse. I really do. It is not my job to fix myself. What I do, and I'm not working on anything, when I get into some kind of difficulty, and I do, just like anybody, when I get into difficulty, it is never, what I think is the problem is never the problem. It's something else. Yeah. And almost every time I get in problem, as I mentioned in an earlier session, it's because I'm trying to do something out here somewhere. You know, I'm trying to fix something. I'm trying to control something I don't control. I'm trying to put expectations on people. And when I put expectations on people, what I give them is free rent in my head. Because I guarantee you that's where they'll move in when I put expectations on them. And so when I get into trouble, it's always because I get stretched out trying to control what I can't control and operating out here somewhere fixing the things. And that's why I don't work on stuff. When I find resolution, it is always exactly the same way. I go back to that thing I was talking about in the session this morning, that I start out, when I get through with the silliness and I get to resolution, I get back to getting solidly clear about who I am and what I'm about. And I tell you that we've talked about business kinds of problems. It's amazing to me how powerful this is for problem solving. And no matter what they are. I had a, I'll give you an example. I've had a marvelous career, and it's literally true that I have never sought a job since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everyone I've ever had came to me. Now, some of them I didn't want. You know, I've had some bad jobs. And I'll give you just a headline of this thing. But I worked in a government agency, and I'm not a political person, but that's a political world. And when I got up into a high level of management, I became a sort of a visible target for changes that occur in government stuff, political or not. And we had a change of administration one year, and every administrator at my level got fired, except me. I was the only one that didn't get removed because we served at the pleasure of the governor. And for some reason, they decided to relocate me. Well, now change is tough, but even if it's your own idea, it's tough. When it's somebody else's, it's brutal. And they will put me in an armpit of a facility. God Almighty. And you talk about mad. That is a kind word. That is not descriptive of what I felt. I just absolutely refused it. I made enough money that it was hard to find anything in another field that I competed well for. If I could have, I would have left a career that meant everything in the world to me. The frame of mind I was in. Now I'm talking grim, black, angry. And so when I finally accepted the fact that I had to go, if you picture this now I'm a bright young manager. My history is being a sort of trendsetter in the system, and I'm driving to my new assignment. Madder than hell. I mean, I have 2 years to go to be eligible for full retirement, and I got it in my mind. Well, I'll go do my time. That was the way I put it. I'll go put in my time, and then I'll leave that and do something decent. Well, that's not me. That's not me. I am not that kind of dude. I had 84 miles to drive, and I was driving up the highway, and I started to think through what I'm doing. And I had a little talk with myself and said, my God, boy, is that all there is to you? Are you so phony that something can't work unless it's done exactly your way? Are you willing to give up everything you stand for in some defiant refusal to do something? You're going to let somebody rob you of your personality? Rob you of everything that you have practiced as a way of life? And I said, no, I don't think I'll do that. And so I went up there to that armpit of an assignment. It was lousy. It was absolutely lousy. I darn near got fired again because when I went in, I treated that decision like it was mine. And I said, boy, you better fasten your seatbelts because we're going to do something. And I turned that sucker upside down. Revolution would be a minor word. And I said, people, man, you're crazy. What are you doing? But now let me tell you the rest of the story. See, I didn't change that. But I went up there and had a marvelous experience, even though I didn't like it. I had a marvelous experience because I kept my principles about me and practiced what I believed to practice. I wasn't practicing principles to have a cushy job. I'm practicing principles because that's the life I believe in. 2 years later, I'm sitting in the grungiest facility in the state, in my view. And the same administration that exiled me called me and said, hey, would you consider taking on a new deal? And I said, well, I'll talk to you. Now, I'm set to max out, and do my time. But here are the same people. And I went back, and then rather than retiring in 2 years, I put in, 15 more years, I guess. A lot more years. And had the finest segment of my career. But now think of what I'm talking about. If I were depending on trying to solve stuff outside, trying to fix stuff, trying to solve the problem, instead of trying to be really integrally rocked in to what I'm about and what I stand for. Suppose that would have happened? You suppose they would have recruited some disgruntled guy sitting up there pouting? I rather doubt that. And that's the way my life has worked. Sometimes there's some tough going, but when I get in and I'm solid on the inside, I'm true to what I believe, I can't lose. I can't lose. Whether it works out some way I'd like to have it or not, I cannot lose. And that to me is what's important about this whole business of being willing for the recovery to happen, being willing for defects to be removed, being willing to stop working on me and let the process do its work. And amazing things have happened for me. They truly have. That simple little deal of recognizing that I've seen what it is in 4. I've taken a look at the tiger. I've taken a look at how it feels to open up to another human being. I've taken a look at my enemy. I know what my alcoholism's about now. And the decision is, you want to keep that sucker or do you want to be free? And I won't be free until I make those moves that bring freedom about. How are we doing? We all right. Anybody? I got through it quicker than I thought it would. Yeah. Anybody, any comments, questions, whatever? I got a walking mic so we can get it down and won't have to strain and jump. Yeah.
Just no matter what I say or talk to him about in regards to the stuff, he just will not do it. He'll go chair meetings. He'll help others. He'll call me and stuff, but he just can't get on the fourth stuff.
And he won't do 5th till he gets 4. That's for sure. Yeah. motivating somebody to do one. Yeah. Real bare, isn't it? It's amazing what happens when the work starts. That's what I was talking about. It's real easy to do all the agreeing stuff, and when we are just sort of mouths platitudes and stuff like that. And getting ready to do forth is a big hurdle. And an awful lot of people back off and never do it. And so I've had that, that they're just not willing to pay the price. And so I don't know. I tell you, I've got I didn't bring it over here, I don't think. I'm not much of a gimmick guy, but one thing I've found is that the writing's difficult for some people. And the example in the book is kind of unwieldy for some folks. I found a thing, a buddy of mine up in Canada, where he took the stuff in the book and then he took the 3 other questions that are on the next page and put it in. I got a copy over there in the room. And I'd be glad to give it to anybody that, if I leave one, and if anybody wants copies of it. I find it helpful because some people, I guess the reason it's behind the 3rd step, because if we've done a good 3rd step and we really feel a sense of connectedness to power, then we're more ready. If we're still, normally when you got somebody that really has legitimate trouble, it's because they haven't done a good enough 3rd to get in the right frame of mind. Because what it calls for is a searching and fearless moral inventory. And that's a big bite. And so that'd be the first thing I'd want to assure, is that they've done a good 3rd, that they've actually done what it calls for in the 3rd. And then with this thing, I'll often give this to somebody and say, take this. And all it is a format that it gives a lot of examples of what angers are about. A lot of people, when they come in, are like me. Resentment was a new word to me. And I knew about fury. I knew about rage. I knew about mad as hell. But resentment was a kind of that's a parlor room word, not a bar room word. And so I didn't really relate to resentment much. And so some people do have trouble grappling this whole business. And so I'll bring one of those over at dinner and you take a look at it. Now, I got 2 of them. I'll give you one, Bruce, in case anybody's got them. Yeah, and I'm not hustling anything now. I just use that. I use it in that Big Book workshop. That makes it real easy to go at it, and it really hits the excuses in the head. If you got it right there in front of you. Other than that, a little kick-ass sponsorship once in a while. When all else fails. Don't mean to be unseemly, but sometimes that comes in the picture. Anybody else? Anything? Now, remember what I told you. I don't want you to get cheated on this deal. You get in as much as you want to. I'm always a little concerned about it. Might be people like me. I couldn't figure out how to ask a question. I had 1,000 and didn't know how to put them.
I have a question about after you've done all your steps and you're in this new way of life, how do you stop yourself from looking at everybody else participating in life and thinking they're not doing it right? And is that really what it's all about? Is this really what life is going to be? I'm just graduating from college, just getting in the workforce.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just feel like everybody's evil in that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about. I tell you, I've been pushing ropes for 40 years, so I know what you're talking about. There's a thing that it's kind of like I was talking about the thing I did in the club, the thing of going around there and jostling up people. I think there's a nitty-gritty reality to AA. If there is only one sincere person in this weekend, I want it to be me. I want it to be me. There's a cold-blooded selfishness to this thing. I want everybody to be in on the action. But I want it to start with me. Yeah. And that's just another way of saying leadership. Yeah, I think you have to have leadership in a program. And sometimes, the thing I've noticed over the years, I've parted company with a lot of people. And I'm not talking about anger and civil wars, but I've parted company with a lot of people. Because a lot of folks, just like we run into, get to a status quo, and that's all they want to do. And I'm simply not going to hang out at mediocrity. I'm not going to do that. And so sometimes I've had to make a move and break ranks with folk because I'm not willing to stay there. That's a simple sounding thing, but and there's nothing malicious about it. It's just, well, for example, I'm somebody who is I'm tremendously concerned about gossip. And I think gossip and criticism are among the most injurious things you can do in the program. I've never seen anything valuable come out of it. I mean, ever. But boy, have I ever seen injury and pointless. And so, simple thing with me. I not only don't do it, I don't listen to it. If I get around people and the best they've got to talk about is somebody else, you can bet I'm gone. Now, I'll be cordial, be friendly, but I'll be gone. I am not going to be part of that. And so it's kind of simple stuff. The thing that I'm concerned about, I don't know if this will make sense to you or not, but you have to watch about being a victim inside the program. And boy, it's so easy to do, because all you have to do is feel like you're being bounced around by people who are unknowing or uncaring, and the first thing you know, you get victimized. I don't want to get too complicated with this, but Joe, would you one more time? It won't be much because we're going to break for long. It's a real important point, I think, about the staying power, about the quality of what we're going to do in the program. Remember I was talking about those people that sort of flee to hiding places in the suburbs? You know who's a loser in that, don't you? Yeah. There's people that are sacrificing their way of life for some little pocket of security and miss the vital juices of Alcoholics Anonymous. And thanks, Jeff. So that's the reason I think it's a critical question, and I'm glad you raised it, because it's. Well, I'll give you one other example of this thing. I used the word leadership, and we've hit at it a little bit here today. A lot of people, like the folks that flee the suburbs and all that kind of stuff, or go into hiding or just quit, will write it off to the meetings aren't like they used to be. Now they got a whole bunch of psychobabble, and they got a lot of profanity, and they got a lot of dual addiction, and on and on. You hear all this stuff. And in all honesty, you run into some kind of ragged meetings sometimes. I mean, that's just a fact. And I've got to personally, I want to make two observations. One is a personal thing. When I go into one of those meetings where we're romancing the illness and droning on about something, every time I get in that, and we get in, and I see what's coming, my heart just drops. And oh Jesus, we're going to be spending an hour goosing a neurotic about something, and I just really hate that. And so, and what I do is, if it gets to me, and it often does, I'll act like I am deaf, dumb, and blind. And I'll act like I haven't heard one single thing that preceded me. I never get rude and offensive with people. I'm not the AA police, but I'm an AA leader. And so when it gets to me, I just start talking about something to do with recovery from alcoholism. And act like I hadn't heard about whether I ought to divorce or leave or sue. And get into talking about the solution. And the amazing thing, I don't recall a single time that the nature of that meeting hasn't changed. And that's nothing magical about it. I'm not the only frustrated guy in the room. Everybody came looking for something. But a lot of people are not willing to step up. And so I think that's a tremendously important thing. Is the way I look at it, it sounds kind of simplistic, and it's the way I like it. And it's to keep from being a victim in this thing, which is easy to do. If you're not hearing what you want to hear in AA, say what you want to hear. Say it. If you're not seeing what you want to see, do what you want to see. It's like I was talking about those meetings, and it's not willful bulldogging people to say I'm not going to put up with unfriendly meetings. I'm going to make that sucker friendly if I can. At least the corner I'm standing in. And to me, that's just a contribution. And it's a way to deal with that kind of stuff. And it is setting an example. It's leading by example. Some people think they've got a holy mission to call people down in meetings and all this kind of stuff. I don't believe that. And that our meetings need to be civil, and they need to be friendly, and they need to be loving. And they don't need me to be monitoring everything. And so what I want to do is be a good example of, if I tell somebody I'm sober 45 years, I want to act like it. I want to act like it. I want to be somebody that's as good of example as I can be of what 45 years of recovery ought to be like. I don't want to be somebody trash talking and gossiping and criticizing junk like that. And I don't want to be getting into meaningless kind of prattle and calling it a meeting. So that's the way that I do. I like to feel a sense of responsibility, and it's for how I carry myself in the meeting and how I conduct myself. And it truly makes a difference. It truly makes a difference. I've made a career out of welcoming people to their own home groups. Does that get at what you're talking about? Yeah. I didn't mean to beat you with words there, but that's an awfully key issue. It sure is. Anybody else? Anything? It's a good interval. Just talk a little. Oh, yeah.
I can relate with what you're saying. A lot of people get off to the personal adventures of their own personal, but we, as you say, are responsible people to bring it back to what the purpose is, which is alcoholism, and let those personal deeds deal with the sponsors and sponsees. Mm-hmm. That's what I was feeling.
Yeah. That's right on for me. That's right on. Yeah, that the way now this is just me, but the way I approach it, I like spontaneity, particularly if it's well planned. You know what I mean? I think every meeting ought to reflect its importance. But and I like to put thought into it. My personal belief is, and if it's wrong, I don't want to know it, but my personal belief is that every meeting is critically important for somebody. Never know who. You never know when you see somebody smiling and shiny and looking good who's about ready to shoot themselves. You never know. Sometimes some little casual cutting remark can be the thing that makes a difference. And so, for that, I'm not uptight when I'm in a meeting. I have a good time. But I try to be considerate of the other people there. And to realize, that what we're dealing with is a killer illness. We're not dealing with social deviancy. We're not dealing with misbehavior. We're dealing with a killer illness. And our meetings is where we rally to kind of support each other in how we deal with it. And so I don't want to get real cheap and frivolous with meetings as just sort of, well, so what, something will happen. Yeah, I like to put more into it than that. And I like for meetings to have a good feel of being where the solution is marketed. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything? What have we forgot, Bruce? All right. Well, listen. It's quitting. It's past quit time. We're supposed to quit at 4:15, 5:15, 4:30. Huh?
For real.
And then you're supposed to pick up again at 4:30.
Yeah.
So we get 15 minutes from come back.
You got a break. You got 15 minutes, and you got to do an hour and a half.
We take more breaks than the Army. I agree. Some of the others may be back, may not. I want to just sort of. Somebody reminded me at the break about one thing I just meant to mention in connection to that 6 and 7 thing that to me is kind of worth consideration a little bit. In addition to all the stuff I was talking about, the one thing that I'm not settled on this 100% about what I really believe, but I surely believe in this neighborhood. I believe there's a place where we really become functional members in the program. And what I mean by that is, I guess we all go through a period where everything is focused around me and what I need. And there comes a point where that changes, or we go home. One or the other is what it looks like to me. And what my feeling is that when we go through the program and we take in, it's a natural, logical thing to do. But if all we do is take in, then obviously there's going to be a point of saturation. And so if I don't get to a point someplace where the rules of engagement change for me, what's going to happen is that meetings will start to get boring. I'll start to get a little borderline brain dead. I'll start to having other interests that sort of overwhelm what I'm doing. And so I think there's an awfully important transition that has to occur. And I believe it's somewhere in what we're talking about here, 6 and 7, is best I can tell. Where the rules of engagement change, and it starts to be how I can get rid of the defects and shortcomings and really become a functional kind of guy. When some of us, it looks like, never get past seeing AA as a place to go and get what we need, and then go on with life. And that's fine if you have limited kind of hunger for something, because I honestly believe that's a time-limited deal. That if we don't get through that thing so that it becomes more than just a place to go and what I get, then what I will do is start ODing on it, and it'll run its course, and it'll start getting to be old hat, and then we'll turn up missing. It seems to be that I know it happened with me, and I don't know when it happened, but I think it was somewhere around in here, where AA became a way of life. And it became a we-focused program instead of a me-focused program. Now, certainly it always stays selfish. I've always got a selfish motive for what I do. But if I don't get to a point where I can start getting real rewards from what happens to other people, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss it. I had a fellow tell me one time, we were chatting after a meeting, and he was an old timer that I really had a lot of respect for. And he said, we talk about AA being a selfish program. Surely it is. He said that it's the strangest kind of selfishness you'll ever see. It's about 10% gimme and about 90% give. And if I don't get that, I miss the whole deal. I don't know what makes it happen, but somewhere in there, I start seeing AA as a place where I do something to make a difference in somebody else's life. It's been an awful lot of years since I've gone to a meeting and my motive or my mental fix was to see what I could get. It's been a long, long time. Rather, I see AA as a place where I go to practice what I do. I go to do my work in AA. I share with people, but it's not a gimme thing to me anymore. That's a given. That's a given. Because what I found is that no matter how much I give to people, I absolutely cannot give more than I get back. The little thing I was talking about taking that extra step to greet people. When I came into AA, I was without question the most isolated person I've ever met. Today, same cat, I have more friends than I can possibly count. Now, I mentioned about that first international convention I went to, and I knew a handful of people. When I go to an international convention today, Jesus, I honest to God could stand in one spot and never move for the entire week and never stop greeting people that I care about who care about me. What a change, eh? What a change. So you see, it changes the whole nature of this thing instead of sort of sitting in there trying to strain out what I need, from seeing this as a place where a way of life takes shape. And the kind of thing that I was kind of alluding to before, and I forgot to get into this, that to me, our whole program, and part of what Bill was talking about in this restoration thing, is that the program is what I carry with me. It's where I start engaging life using these principles. And that's the kind of thing I was talking about with those remarkable things that have happened in my life, and I'm talking about hundreds of them, that are just product of practicing it. And so somewhere in there in that transition, something happened so that I became an AA member. I mean, you could have tattooed it on my forehead. I mean, I was absolutely dyed-in-the-wool AA. And I'm that wherever I go. Everywhere I go. And I'm just as free with it. I mean, I'm not fearfully hiding anywhere. I'm able to engage in life. I'm able to be myself. God, what a freedom. What a freedom. A lot of people think I'm goofy. Fine. I have a good time. And the thing is, when I do stuff like that, and all it is just making this program come alive, is this world becomes a warm and wonderful place. Now, I'm not naive. I live in the same world you do. I get on that plane tomorrow, and I don't know if I'm going to Raleigh or Afghanistan. I'm not naive about the real world. And I know that there's some kind of ugly folk around that. But I don't meet many of them. I really don't. I mean, once in a while I meet a jerk. But my God, I got enough sense to get away. I don't hang out with them. Yeah. And so when I practice this thing, it's just amazing to me what happens. That I was when I was working, I worked in an office complex, and if I'm working, I like to work. I either go to lunch and stay all day or don't go. And so there's a little one of the little grill type things in the office building was next door to my office. And I went over there one day, and I was just going to grab a sandwich for lunch and take it back to the office. So I went in, and I went to the line. I'd never been in there. And there was a little girl that was working that counter, and she was not a handsome beast at all. She really was not one of life's flowers. Poor little girl just looked kind of sad, and so I just started messing with her a little bit. I figured she needed a little lift, and so I just started messing with her a little bit, and so we were laughing and carrying on. And I ordered a tuna sandwich. Good thing I like tuna. Now, all I wanted to do was just grab a quick sandwich. I took that sucker out of there. There was tuna running everywhere. Man, she gave me a carton of tuna, I think. I mean, it was just everywhere. I couldn't even eat it. It was just slopping out. And, well, overdid it that time, boy. But you see what I'm talking about? This is a pitiful little girl working for next to nothing. Guy comes in and just takes a minute and says, "Hey, you're important. You're not a spatula. You're a human." And stuff happened. About 6 months later, I went back in there. When I got to the door, I really wanted a Reuben. But it didn't make any difference. Because when I got to the door, she started grinning, and she grabbed that. And I'm telling you, here we were with another. I'll be eating tuna the rest of my life if I But that's been my experience. That it's not a matter of going out and yelling at everybody, "Hey, I'm an alcoholic and treat me special," or anything like that. It's about these principles making me functional in this world, making me free to be myself, to engage in life with gusto. And I'm telling you, it's a rare, I run it once in a while, but it's a rare experience when I don't find more than unbelievably good response. I mean, and I go everywhere. I mean, I'm on the go all the time. Airports. I mean, man, well, I mean, I can tell you, I'll just tell you one airport story. When the stuff first started and it started to be like going through a maze trying to get in an airport, I was really kind of hustling one day trying to get in there. I didn't know how bad it was. And there was a girl that she had been overserved a little, and she had a little extra girth. But, and she was working. I mean, working. And they were having to do everything. I was doing the body searches, bomb sniffing, toting suitcases. And, I messed with her a little bit when I got up there. I said something like, "Why don't you work on the quitting time and take the day off?" Or, something like that. And when's Friday? Something. Well, the minute I said something, she said, "Man, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. I'm going. I don't care if that plane flies or not." And I said, "You go, girl. Get on out of here." Well, we already were through with our junk. And she called to me and she said, Hey, come back a minute. I forgot something. She kicked me in first class. Now, I wasn't looking for that. But I didn't turn it down. I said, "Okay, fine. I'll go up there." And see, the thing is that I, honest to God, am not trying to manipulate somebody. I like to live in a friendly world. I don't like to just deal with sort of stiff, rigid people that are frustrated. And it doesn't cost me a cent to just sort of give somebody a lift. See somebody out toting and sweating and say, "Hey, guy, that looks like tough work. Go get them. Glad you're doing that." Not me. Anything just to sort of brighten up a little bit. And so, when we talk about practicing principles and taking this program into our lives, that's a very real thing to me. It's not about becoming a wandering Mahatma Gandhi. It's just a matter of being a liberated human being that can go out with some concern for other folks. And geez, does it ever work? And so to me, this whole transition, and I don't think it's something we deliberately or mechanically do, But somewhere in this process, when we start being rid of those defects that own us, if we're open, then we start seeing AA as a place where we recognize other people. We start being concerned about other people. We start worrying about making it a good healing place for somebody coming in. And the whole nature of the game changes. If I'm sitting around thinking about me and working on my problems for very long, I'm going to miss the deal. Going to miss it. Got to recognize it. It's a strange kind of selfishness, but if I cannot get my satisfaction from trying to do something for others, it'll be a short time span in AA. I believe that. And I think that's part of that transition. I just wanted to mention a little of that the amends stuff, we'll deal with that. I apologize about that time. I got interested in what we were doing and totally forgot what time it was. I thought we were just getting started. Now what time we quit this time? 6:15. Will you be the time keeper? Okay. All right. Good deal. Amends stuff. I'm glad to talk about it, and yet I have some stuff about it. Now, you could gather from the experience I've told you that I had some very difficult stuff to deal with in amends, that that would be unbelievable. But the amends process, to me, is a critically important thing. Like that 6 and 7 will sort of get me plugged into engaging in life. 8 and 9 to me are the basic tools for freedom. They're the basic tools for freedom. My belief is, for whatever it's worth, is that defects really are deep-seated, chronically troubling conditions. And they don't go away over time. They go away by specific action that surgically removes them almost. And so critically important. My belief is, and I think I said it the other night, if I didn't, I'll say it again anyway. My belief is that every time I've misused, used, connived, hurt, disappointed, broke hearts, ripped people off, every time I did that, I didn't win. I lost. Because every time I won those shallow victories, I paid for it with a piece of my soul. And so I was owned by those warped and distorted relationships that permeated my entire life. And I honestly believe that I will never be a free man until I go back and make right those wrongs. And that's the purpose of the amends to me. And the process by which we do amends is pretty forthright. That it's a detailed thing. That book is a detailed manual when I'm open to following the direction in it. And it lays out precisely how to go about this thing. Some folks say that the amends list already made in the inventory. I didn't find that to be the case. There was a lot of it in there, but I didn't find that to be the case. What I had to deal with was a mind that magnified everything. And when I thought about the amends list, I thought that sucker was going to look like the Jekyll Island phone book. I thought it was going to be a huge list of people. Because in my mind, recognizing that I had never had anybody that I was associated with that I didn't do some damage to, I thought I owed amends to the world. But then when I started thinking about it, and particularly when I started writing it down, the list shrunk. It didn't grow. It shrunk. Because what I found was that most people had enough sense to not let me hurt them. I was obvious. I mean, man alive, somebody got involved with me was either awfully gullible or else got blindsided. I mean, you could see me coming a block away. And most people had enough sense to keep their distance and say, don't mess with that dummy. And so the list shrunk. It was a small, relatively small list compared to what I thought it would be, but formidable. And the people on it were a lot of the obvious ones. That family, of course. I mean, my God, they were stuck with me. And so family were amends that the people whose lives I took, people that I'd interacted with, people that I had defaulted, and people that I'd broken promises to, and stuff like that. There were a good number of people. Institutions, organized religion was on the list because I had a very live resentment about that, and that had to be addressed. That was something that I couldn't just continue to carry around. So there were a lot of things that ultimately showed up on there. And there was a lot of wisdom in putting this step together, because it says make the list, and in a huge word, become willing. Become willing. And I wasn't willing. I wasn't willing for a lot of reasons. Fear. I had an enormous amount of fear about making amends. I had what the book describes a lot, that it was a two-sided deal. Every fight I was in had an opponent. And so there was always that kind of thing of, yeah, but this, look what he did. And it took some real thinking for me to get clear in my mind that the amends are about me. They're about my condition. If I can take that a step further and can right relationships, that's good. But that doesn't always happen. I had to understand that it was not about human relations and negotiating relationships. That's a bonus if it happens. But it was essentially about getting rid of the stuff that owned me in terms of the guilt over the things I had done to people or failed to do. And so when it was talking about my side of the street, that was important for me to understand. And becoming willing required a simple thing: forgiveness. I had to be willing to forgive the other person and go into that amends process with no expectations. Because if I put expectations on it, then I'm manipulating. And so that was a tough thing to get that down, and then to be willing to make amends to them all. And then the ninth step, it puts the action into place. The eighth to me was tremendously important, so that I get this stuff out, take a look at it, see it for real for what it is, to prayerfully consider each situation, to get to a point where I am honest to God, ready to try to make right that wrong. And now I had some big ones. I was in a maximum custody joint, so I had some limitations on what I could do, but I wasn't totally limited in what I could do. There were people that I could communicate with and try to do something. There were the victims in the crime. You could call it an accident, but the crime where two people lost their lives because of me. And as you can well imagine, that's an enormous kind of an amends to contemplate. And I was hungry for any morsel of how to go about that. Every time I ever heard anybody talk about amends, I listened as intently as a man could. Because I was looking for anything that would say, how do you go about this? I mean, how do you approach something where the victims are no longer alive and the families, a strange thing, even drunk, even before I got in AA, I think I instinctively knew that I should communicate with those families. And I tried. I sent word that I would like to communicate, and they said no. So it was not only the formidability of trying to deal with that, but with the wall that had been put up saying, "Leave us alone." And that's a real dilemma. Eh? And so I'll just talk about that one a little bit, and then about some others that are not quite as heavy. Now, thank God, most people don't have to deal with this. But if you run into people, and there are many, I want you to know that there's a way to find peace and to find amends, even in something as dastardly as that. And say that to anybody. Come and call me. I tell you, the most tortured people that I meet a lot of people around the country. The most tortured people that I've ever seen in my life are people who did something like I did and, quote, got away with it. You wouldn't believe how many times been somewhere at a conference, somebody come up and want to talk private and tell me that they'd done something like that and were never detected, or else got a slick attorney and got out, or something like that. Most tortured people I've ever seen. Well, it was a real dilemma. And so I hung on to everything I heard and did everything that even made a semblance of sense. I started out directly with the victims. Well, how much can you do? I pictured the people. I prayed with their images in mind. I wrote to them. Communicated every way I could with what existed in my mind about that. Did everything I was capable of doing, but it's only so much. The real amends that needed to be made further was with the families. Now that door is closed. But what the step says is become willing. Now I'll guarantee you I was not eager for the meeting, but I prayed for the opportunity. That I would be willing and that an opportunity would come. Well, I pretty well wrote it off, in terms of being able to do anything immediately, but of course I never left my mind. And went on. I made a few amends like that. And the first one that I did after I got out of the institution, the first amend that I did was, I don't know why, but this guy was prominent on my list. He was a fella that had hired me. I got thrown out of the Army with an undesirable discharge, and he hired me. And I had been a remarkable salesman for him for a year, but I was a real dog. I tell you what, I made some major league damage there. I had to be a good salesman to survive. I wrecked one of his vehicles that second day on the job and survived. He saw a spark. He saw a lot of other stuff too in that year. He finally fired me, and then he should have fired me much earlier. I was salesman of the year in that city for working for that company, drunk, between drunks. And I had gotten a little money from him, It seemed like a little, but he probably thought it was a lot. And I got it, and I had paid back some of it. He was really a fine man. I had enormous respect for him. And for some reason, I think just the quality of guy, that he was top of the list on something I wanted to do. Now, I'll tell you how I went about this. It's lousy business, unless you're talking about recovery. I was working in a mill, just out of the joint. Didn't have any money. I mean, none. I had gotten that thing down. I didn't owe him but $30 more. It wasn't a big deal in money terms. But it was a big deal in my terms, in my need to straighten something out with a decent person. I borrowed the $30. Now that is not smart business, but I borrowed it. And I went over to the place and went in. Now I knew that they were all going to pounce on me. I mean, I knew right off the bat they'd say, "You sorry rascal, you're back. We've got you." I walked in. The secretary said, "Yes, sir." Didn't even know me. I probably looked different. And I said, any chance to see Mr. Brown? She said, well, he's awfully busy. I said, but it's about some money I owe him. And she said, well, I'll see if he'll see you. And I knew that might have some magical charm. And so she went in, and I guess he was curious as much as anything else. And she said, he said to come on in, but he's in kind of a hurry. So I went in. Now, I didn't tell him right off the bat. I hadn't learned how to go about this thing real well. And I told him, I said, Mr. Brown was here, and I ripped you off for some money, and I paid you back a lot of it, but I still owe you some, so I brought you that money, and I want you to know I'm sorry for that. And he's a very nice man. He said, well, yeah, I really appreciate that, but I don't need that $30. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't remember anything about that. And I don't need the money. And I said, well, it really isn't about whether you need the money. It said, I need to pay you. And he said, well, thanks, but you screw up my books. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not worried about your books. And then I told him what I was doing. I was in AA, that this was a vital part of my recovery to do this. And that fellow sat there, and that's what it took to get that little bit of an amends made. Because it wasn't about him. It wasn't about the magnitude. It wasn't there to go come get me. It was to try to right a wrong. To try to where I violated a trust as much as anything. And so when he finally understood, he reached up, took off his glasses, and he said, well, I'll be darned. I've been in business 40 years, and I have never seen anything like this. and from that day on, he's been a fast friend. And every time I see him, periodically, I'll be up in Charlotte, that's where he's from. And periodically, I'll be up there, and I'll run into him at one of his favorite restaurants. And his word is, he'll always say, how's that work going that you're in? And excuse me, fine. And say, that's about amends. That I don't want to go back to that job, but I don't have any question if I needed that job or needed to be his vice president, that he could give me serious consideration. And to me, that's a simple kind of amends. But when I did that, oh my God, did I feel good? Did I feel good? The one thing, I don't give much advice, but one thing, if you are hung up in trying to look at the specter of amends, my suggestion would be to pick an easy one. Pick a lightweight. And once you feel that rush of cleansing that happens, you won't have to worry about the next one. You'll go get it. And that was the thing that started the ball rolling for me. The place, I tell you, every amends I ever made was awkward and clumsy. More so for the other people than for me. Like most people, when I started to make amends, people that were friends and family and stuff like that, most people would want to just sort of pat me on the head and say, "Oh, that's okay." My mother, I try to make amends with her, and verbally go at things. She said, "Oh, that's no problem. You were always a good boy." Yeah, Bob. Right. Yeah. Sure, that's what you thought every time you came down and got me out of jail. I'm sure that you thought I was a good boy. But that's a mother. Yeah, that's a mother. That's what she said. I wasn't. She never believed I was alcoholic. The whole time she lived, she never believed it. I was at her house one time. I was living there when I first got out. And I heard her talking to a neighbor. And the neighbor said, "What does your son do that he's so busy?" And his mother said, "Well, he's in that AA thing, and he just stays on the go." And the woman said, "Oh, is he an alcoholic?" She said, "Oh, no." No. I'm a little boy. I'm not an alcoholic. But that's what I ran into, not just with her, But everybody was kind of awkward and embarrassed by it, and they just wanted to change the subject. And I always had to push the issue. A lot of us, if we don't watch it, we'll kind of cop out on this thing. And we think because we get their benevolent blessing that everything's okay. But it's about getting out those things we've done and making right the best we can. And so in every case, without exception, in every case, I had to push it past, we're just proud of what you're doing. That's a nice thing. But it's also very important for me to get those skeletons out of the closet and to get out what I need to say to those folks and to try to make it right. And, and sometimes it's a lifetime deal. Sometimes it's a lifetime deal. I didn't know how to do that stuff very well. I sort of groped at it a lot. And at one point, when I started making a decent salary, now this is arrogant, but it was well intended, but just stupidly arrogant. I assumed because I hated my hometown that everybody did. Yeah. And so I said, well, now I've got enough money now to get some credit. I tried to buy my mother a house. I mean, I knew that anybody would hate that place she lived. And so I told her, I said, Mother, I got a real nice thing I want to tell you. I'm going to go over and show you this house. And I said, why don't you pick out one of those things and we'll get it for you. She looked at the house. She said, well, that's nice, but I like where I live. I wanted to send her to a shrink. There's something wrong with this girl. Yeah, but making a mess didn't mean to change her life, But that was just that fumbling thing of trying to get it right. What I had to do, and I'll just take it one more little step with this thing. I had a mother that was the biggest problem that with her and I, other than just my stuff, was that she was somebody who overmothered. And a good deal of stuff that came out in inventory and all that kind of stuff was that a lot of what I did was in sort of defiant rebellion to that feminine mastery thing or something, and so she just overdid it. If I had wanted to, I mean, just tell you the thing I'm talking about. If I had wanted to, I could have stayed drunk forever at her house and would have never heard a cross word, as long as she took care of me. But see, sobriety doesn't mesh well with that. Sobriety doesn't mesh well. I can't be a kept creature, and I can't be taken care of by somebody. I've got to become a functioning human. Now that was difficult. All amends are not about kissy poo, because sometimes it's a tough deal. If you can picture that, and this is something that I needed to be pretty keen about, to start changing a relationship that's just intrinsically natural to a mother is a tough thing. And so you've got to have your feet on your ground if you tackle one like that. I had, at one point, I'd been back home around 2 years or so. My mother stood and looked me in the eye and said, I would rather see you back in prison than like you are. Excuse me. I don't care how tough you are. That gets to the heart of things. Well, now I knew she didn't mean that. I knew that. I also knew that she didn't have a program. I did. See, the responsibility in amends is mine, not the other person. I'm the guy who's trying to straighten out a warped relationship. And so not only with her, but with others, I had to learn to be patient and to learn to understand them and not just have them understand me. And to be patient and to help them because they don't have the program. My mother didn't have an outline of how to turn loose of a son in the only way you know how to mother. And so when she saw it changing, she saw what looked like a monster to her, I guess. And that she hits out. She's a feisty woman, so she hits out with the only thing she knew to hit with. Well, we developed a wonderful mother-son relationship. But she had to understand that her son was no longer a little boy. He was a grown man. And I'll tell you the thing that happened, it's an amazing thing. I was always the embarrassment of my family. I mean, I was the one that they didn't tell when the family reunion was scheduled. They didn't want me to show up. I became the head of my family. Didn't plan to be. I didn't want to be. I became the head of the family. It's a strange thing that happens when you get recovered and you get into developing a real life with some principles to it. There's just some natural things that accrue, like responsibility. And when sometimes, they're not the sunny day picnic things that I'm talking about, but they're deeply satisfying things. To be able to take a place in the world and be responsible and be able to function there. Now, when my mother started getting critically ill, she had a series of strokes and wound up in a nursing home for a year before she died. And it was an amazing thing, even with the schedule I had, even without having to manipulate. Hardly at all. I was able to be there every week at that nursing home. And I'll tell you one thing. You talk about making amends. I'm sure somebody here has the experience with that. I don't know of a tougher job than trying to go into one of those places and bring something. Next time you get to thinking that you're lonely, suck it up and go visit one. Tough deal. And I was able to be there every week and to be attentive. Amends goes on. Yeah, what I do every week when I go, I sit out in the parking lot, pray hard, to get up enough spirit to walk in. To add something. And of course I go in and I'd do my usual stuff, and I'd start messing with the people in the wheelchairs, wanting them to drag race or whatever. And so every week they know when I'm coming. They're lined up, they're all lined up. And my mother's down in her room saying, "Don't mess with them. Come on." So sometimes it just pays off in spades, But those things of how stuff changed. When the time came when she had a cerebral hemorrhage and she was dying, and interesting and very telling thing about when the medical team started to deal with the decisions that had to be made, and they assembled us and they took her around, didn't know us, and the guy took a look over at me and said, "I think you're the one that has to call the shot." And I didn't like that. I didn't like that a bit about whether we continue life support or stop. Nobody wants that kind of decision. But, excuse me, that is where the program rises to the occasion. Able to make a tough decision in the interest of what I knew she would want. Never prayed harder in my life. And when it was all finished, strange thing, the deepest sense of gratitude I ever have in my life is when I go through a deep valley like that and see that what we have here is equal to it. It gives what we need. So powerful stuff in that business of how amends do more than just pay up debts. Changes relationships, changes how we function in the world, and makes us free people. 6:15, you said, right? the last I mentioned the one. I don't always go into this one because it makes a point, but it's heavier than you normally want to do. You know, the thing of trying to make amends to the family. I'm right now. I'm walking a guy through that I sponsor doing amends with the same thing. I'll tell you how that came about. I mentioned when I made the list, what I did was I pretty much accepted the fact that you can't impose on people. You can't force your way in. You have to respect where they are and not what the book says. We can't get our solution at somebody else's expense. You know, and so I understand that. But I also understood the need to make the amends. And say what I did was prayed for the willingness, prayed for the opportunity. And I never did anything overtly to make it happen. I didn't pray. And one day I got a call from an attorney up in the state of Michigan and introduced himself. And he said, I'm doing something in a lawsuit originating out of that accident. And he said, we would like for you to come up here and be a witness. And I said, I'd be glad to do anything I can, but I'm a lousy witness. I have nothing to testify to. You know, I wasn't even a witness to my own behavior. And so I've got nothing to say, but I'd be glad to do anything I could. And he said, well, we think it would help. And I said, all right, then I'll be glad to do it. So I went up. And now I didn't want to do that either. So here I had to go into a courtroom with the families and walk back through. It was a lawsuit, and the premise was that it wasn't really my fault, that the people crossing the street had jumped back to avoid another car and jumped into mine. And now I don't know. I have no earthly idea. Of course that was tempting to hang on to. But what I had to accept was the bottom line reality. When a guy like me is blasting down a street, blind, drunk, blacked out, that's like firing a bullet down there. There is no mitigation for that. And so, I mean, it was tempted to say that, but I testified, and it was lousy testimony. I mean, just what I didn't know. And at a point in the proceedings, now don't ask me why. And you a little legal background, you know that this ain't supposed to happen this way. At a point, the judge wanted to have a conference with the attorneys. He put me and the victims in a room. Boy, you talk about loneliest guy on the universe. Yeah, I step in that door and I look, and I'm thinking, oh my God, the prayers are answered, you know. But not now, you know. I'm not quite ready. And so I thought, Jesus, do you move or run? And I could have hid in a corner, but I had the opportunity that I'd been praying for. And so I went to the first family and asked them if we could talk, and they said sure. And so we talked and said what I needed to say. And that family was as gracious and forgiving as if they were my own. I couldn't believe it. But they were absolutely wonderful. I went to the second family, and they were a first-generation family that had moved over from one of the Eastern European countries, and they were pretty stark people. They were pretty stark in how they approached things. And they were courteous. You know, I went over and asked them to talk, and they said, okay. And listened very courteously, very attentively. When they got through, the father said, we appreciate it. Thank you. We can't forgive. Well, I understood that. Anybody could understand that. The thing, and they said again, they were the ones that said it before, just leave us. And so that's where I had to leave it. The thing is that my heart goes out to that family. The other families free. They're free. Hurt, but free. This family can't turn loose. But what our step is, make amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others, and that's certainly a case. And so sometimes it's a tough challenge. Some amends are not made in one fell swoop, just like the life that I led with my mother. Those were a continuing amends in how our relationship became solid and strong. It's the same thing in this. There is no remediation for this kind of a thing. And nobody's ever asked me anything. But what I consider a part of the amends thing for me is what I do with my life. I can't undo what I've done, but I can change what I do. There's no question that that's part of what produces the zeal that I have in AA. No question that it's a part of what motivates me to do something. I have a lot of interest in young people. Do a lot of stuff with young people at AA. And part of that is contributing. You can't just write it off. And so what I do to make a difference, at one point in my corrections career, I had the opportunity to set up a complex of 3 institutions to deal with young folk, just about the ages of the ones I killed. And man, I'll tell you, if you can't see the message, I'd have had to have been blind. Yeah. So tremendous things come when I get out of the way and let stuff happen, and then just try to be of service the best I can. And so amends is a tremendously powerful kind of thing that will make me free. The way I like to look at this thing, it's kind of like I mentioned in an earlier session that Bill was saying, that the function of this program is to restore me to a place in this world where I can make my contribution and I can take my place and be a decent human. Yeah, that's the function. It's not for me to hide out somewhere. And if I do the things that are laid out, one thing's absolutely guaranteed by what we're talking about here. I'll be a free man. I'll be a free man. The day will come, and has come, when I can walk the face of this earth, any street, and any human I meet, I can look in the eye. What a great, great revelation. I can say to anybody, and often do, ask me anything you want. My life's my life's an open book. If I can't say that, I still got some work to do. And if I can say that, then what this program offers has come. And the freedom that's produced. Now, that hasn't got much to do with not drinking whiskey. But it has an awful lot to do with learning to live and being free of those demons. That's the kind of thing that puts the old tiger to sleep. You know, when you do these things, the old boy lays down and takes a nap. Yeah. And if I don't mess with him much, he'll sleep pretty good. Yeah. If I mess with him, though, he'll rile up every once in a while. But that's what it's about to me. It's getting those forces that drive us, deal with those things of the past, and be free to engage in the work that we got to do. Good stuff. Anything? Anybody? Yeah. Kind of hard to ask about anything like that, isn't it? Anybody hung up on a man? Anything that? Mm-hmm. I did, direct, both. Yeah, direct. I never addressed the issue of her other overmothering. I never addressed that. That was her deal. But I did amends about all the stuff, the commission and the omission. I dealt with that with her directly. A lot of it, there was one other kind of tough line thing associated with that. When you talk about amending means changing. It's not just about apologies, it's about changing. One of the things that we had to change in the relationship, and I'm the guy that changed it, was that I had to set the limits on the relationship. I couldn't go back and just play into her need to nurture. I couldn't play into that. And so we set up, like when I went to my mother's house, we would have a time that I was going to stay. And I wasn't going to linger. Yeah. And so that way we had a well understood kind of thing, that it wasn't one of those absorbing deals. Now that was a change that I had to make in that relationship. And it was a very healthy change. She visited in my home, and so there was a whole difference in dealing with a grown man who's a son and dealing with a kid, and so I had to be patient with her as she kind of adjusted in that. I did make direct amends, for specific things. And the other was just a matter of trying to be the kind of son that I never had been. And it's funny, I was there one time with her. Strange thing about Black Eye. I was admiring a picture that she had on her wall. And I said, I really like that. And she said, well, you ought to like it. You sent it to me. I said, Mother, you've been drinking. And she said, no. She told me where it's from. Yeah, I was making a amends one time about ripping her off, and she said, that good boy stuff. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, you sent me that money the whole time you were in the Army. I didn't know it. I wouldn't have sent that money if I'd have known that. So I guess she had a little bit of ammunition to say, well, he ain't all bad, The guy's got something else. Yeah.
Did I hear you say that AA came to the jail where you were at?
Yep.
And that's how you got. Did you say the whole sentence, the whole 15 years?
No.
No.
I'll go into a little bit of that in the morning. I finally got. I stayed there 3.5 years, and then they sent me to North Carolina. Yeah, but I'm gonna go into that a little bit and finish the story some in the context of that 10, 11, 12 that we're going to do tomorrow. Yeah, so I think we can work that in, and I'll just be fast. Let's start on time, and then we can finish on time, so I don't have to miss the airplane. Yeah, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Anything else? Anybody? Yeah.
In working with other people, do you find that a lot of people get stuck on the 9th step? And if so, how do you encourage them to press on, to continue trying to do that?
I find a lot of people get stuck on it. I find an awful lot of people that get lost in manipulation and amends. I find a lot more of that. Where people are going to do something with an expectation of what's going to happen. And when you do that, it's automatically compromised. And so that's the biggest hurdle I find with folks, is that you're thinking amends means patch things up instead of making right the wrong, of taking responsibility to clean my side of the street. Yeah, so that's the biggest hurdle I find. Is that usually when folks understand it, I like to get them plowing on 8. Get them plowing on 8 and not worry about amends. If they get willing, they'll become able. But that's the way I like to go at it. If anytime somebody's talking to me about this, particularly very difficult amends, I never talk with them about amends. I talk with them about 8, because that's always where the hang-up is. Yeah. Well, it messes up the tape. But
You were saying that amends, your part is to take responsibility for what you did, and then that you have part of that is your forgiveness of the other person. Do you think that absolute forgiveness of the other person is a prerequisite to making your amends to them?
I don't know about absolute, but I think I think it has to be enough that we're not plea bargaining. You know, that at least I'm going to go there and focus on my behavior. If I'm focusing on the other one, like I got a guy, I won't say much because you may know him, but it's not Keith, it's another guy. I had a guy I've been sponsoring for a lot of years, and I started listening to this fella routinely talk about amends. And he's a wonderful guy with words, but when I really listened, what I heard was he never made any. Yeah. What he had done was tried aborted mediation, and so I sat him down. Yeah, and I hate to do that with a guy with long-term sobriety, and told him, I said, man, you got trouble here. You've never done amends, and I couldn't think of one amends that he had genuinely made. And he was hung up on that thing. He was telling me about one with his daughter. Now he's got a totally estranged relationship with his daughter. Hadn't seen her, effectively for many years. He started trying to do something. He sent her some money. She didn't respond, and he quit. And I said, "Whoa, Jack, you weren't buying the lady. You were sent her a gift. You may not get anything back." So here's a guy with many years sobriety who, the best I can tell, and he didn't argue with it, has never done an effective amends. Because it was hung up just at that point of, I do this and you do that. And so I think it's just a matter of being at least free enough that you're not going to reincite a fight or, something like that. Or go in there go to the mat. That I like that preparation of having a list, knowing exactly what the wrong is, what your mission is. Then when you go in, you're going to have a good shot at doing it. So I think the fight has to be over enough that you can do it with some neutrality. Yeah.
What parameters do guidelines do you use for sexual abuse or behavior or harm others? What do you use to know that you're not opening old wounds or hurting someone more than helping yourself?
Well, it is a key thing. It's kind of like that thing with my mother. I mean, I could not have dealt with that over-mothering thing without hurting her. And that's her. I mean, I'm not going to redo her personality. And so I had to accept that this is a place where I don't go in there and try to remake her. I just sort of take care of my side of that. It is a tough... It's like that family I was talking about. I yearned for getting some peace with that and some peace for them. But I couldn't do it, because if I'd have pushed any further, it would have been at their expense. And so that, to me, it's a matter of being sensitive to the other person, not putting a whole bunch of heat on them. I like, the people where I forced them to let me make amends. It was gentle force. It wasn't slam dunking them. It was just sort of gentle pressure and persistence. And that's the only thing I know is I like to be very considerate of the other person, and to be very clear that I'm dealing with my side of the street. And if anything else comes up, I would probably put it to a separate discussion. I would make it a part of the amends thing. And so I've got a pretty narrow agenda when I go at that. I don't want to get into global stuff.
Tom?
Yeah.
Tom, I had an experience with my family would not accept the fact that I was alcoholic. They would accept the fact that Jerry was. And the only...
No wonder.
They would not respond to my anniversaries or my amends or any of that kind of thing. They wanted to think in those terms that I was all right, even though the hurt that I put them through was horrendous. And the only way they recognized it, if we went out to dinner, my father would stick his hand over the glass when the wine steward came around and said, "She doesn't drink." He would always speak for me. But as far as making amends and being considerate of the other people, when my mother was dying, I called a long-term member in Alcoholics Anonymous before I took the trip to England, And I said, I've got everything written down. I have never been able to make amends, and I must make these amends to her. And she said, what for? To make yourself feel good?
Mm.
And I said, I didn't look at it that way. She said, your mother does not want you to drag up all those old things when she's got a couple of weeks to live. And so what I ended up doing, I was the best daughter I could be. And we were sitting there one afternoon. I don't know if I can do this. And I said, I was not always the best daughter I could be. And she said, no, you weren't. You were a little devil. And I said, as you know, I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous now for 17 years, and I've really tried to help others. And she patted me on the leg, and she said, yes, my dear, I know.